She sat alone on Christmas Eve,
Baby, I
her
missed you
makeup
so
perfect, her
much.
emerald dress glowing under
We're
the
here
lights.
now.
But her
Everything
heart
is
shattered when
okay.
her blind date walked out saying I was never really interested. The restaurant was full of laughter, but for her the world had gone quiet. Just when she thought her night couldn't get worse, a little girl in a red velvet dress walked up and said softly, "Can we sit with you?" That question changed everything. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Snow had been falling since late afternoon, blanketing the streets of downtown Asheville in a hush that made the town feel almost sacred. Through the frosted windows of Bellini's on the ridge, golden light spilled onto the sidewalks where couples hurried past, wrapped in scarves and laughter. Inside the restaurant hummed with warmth, soft carols, the gentle clinking of glasses and the chatter of families gathered for Christmas Eve dinner. It should have been the kind of night Evelyn Hart had always dreamed of. But at table 7 a single candle flickered beside an untouched glass of wine and an empty chair. She sat perfectly still, fingers tracing the stem of her glass as if afraid it might break. Across from her, the other chair still slightly pulled back was a reminder that someone had been there not long ago. The waiter had seen him leave. Everyone had. Connor Price, her blind date, had stood up 15 minutes earlier, shrugged on his coat and said he was just not feeling it. No argument, no apology, just a flat smile and the scent of his cologne fading as he walked out into the snow. "I only came to get my mother off my back," he'd said, not even looking embarrassed. "She thinks I need to settle down. Guess she was wrong about this one." Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn with the echo of his voice and the dull burn of humiliation creeping up her throat. Around her, the restaurant was alive with joy, children tugging at ribbons on gift bags, couples leaning close across candlelight, waiters wishing tables, Merry Christmas with practiced cheer. And there she was, a woman in her 30s, dressed in her best emerald green dress, sitting across from no one. She tried to smile at the thought of how absurd she must look, a lone figure among the glitter and laughter. But when she lifted her eyes, they blurred. She blinked quickly, trying to hold herself together, pressing her palms flat against the table until her nails dug into the wood. "Don't cry here. Not here." But her chest ached with the weight of all the other nights she'd gone home alone, all the times she'd believed the next one might be different. At 31, she was tired of pretending she didn't care, tired of being the one left behind. A waiter passed, hesitated, then offered a soft, sympathetic smile. "Would you like to order something to go, ma'am?" he asked. His voice was kind, careful. She shook her head. "No, thank you," she managed. He nodded and slipped away, leaving her with the faint music and the rustle of plates. She picked up the candle in front of her, its small flame wavering like it too was uncertain about staying. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Merry Christmas," she whispered under her breath, a hollow joke meant for no one. She thought about calling her sister, who had insisted this blind date would be different, but she couldn't bear to admit that once again she'd been wrong. Instead, she reached for her purse, telling herself she'd just drive home, pour a glass of wine, maybe watch one of those old holiday movies where everything worked out in the end. The truth was, she didn't want to go home. Her apartment, tidy and silent, always felt colder on nights like this. She could already picture herself curled on the couch, the glow of the Christmas tree reflecting off her phone screen, the quiet ticking of the clock marking another year that hadn't gone the way she hoped. She looked around one last time, trying to memorize the scene as if it might help her understand what had gone wrong. The couples laughing, the families toasting the children, pressing their faces against the window to watch the snow. The world looked so full of belonging, and she was just the empty space between them. For a moment she considered leaving cash on the table and slipping out unnoticed, but her legs wouldn't move. The weight of loneliness felt too heavy, pinning her in place. A single tear slid down her cheek and she wiped it away quickly, glancing around in embarrassment. No one was looking her way. No one ever did. The candle sputtered, shrinking lower. She stared at it as if it were her last bit of light, the final proof that something, anything, was still burning. She reached for her coat, ready to slip away before the tears could start again, when a small voice broke through the murmur of the restaurant. "Ma'am," it said softly, "are you okay?" Evelyn froze. The voice was high and light, the kind that could only belong to a child. She turned, and there beside her table stood a little girl no older than 5. Her hair was a tangle of wild blonde curls that caught the candlelight, and her eyes, big, hazel, and impossibly sincere, looked straight into Evelyn's. The girl wore a red velvet dress trimmed in white, and one of her hair bows had slipped halfway out, dangling like a forgotten ornament. Evelyn tried to pull herself together, wiping quickly under her eyes. "Oh, hi, sweetheart. I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. The girl tilted her head, studying her the way children do when they know the truth already. "You look sad," she said. "My daddy says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but you shouldn't be sad all by yourself. That makes it worse." Something in Evelyn's chest cracked just a tiny bit like ice under soft pressure. She let out a laugh, wet, shaky, but real. "That's very wise advice," she murmured. The little girl's face brightened. "My daddy's very smart," she said proudly, then turned to point across the restaurant. "That's him over there." Following her finger, Evelyn saw a man sitting 3 tables away. He was tall, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair and kind eyes that looked suddenly very alarmed. When their eyes met, he pushed back his chair so fast it scraped the floor and hurried over. "I'm so sorry," he said in a low, flustered voice. She has no concept of boundaries." The little girl crossed her arms. "I do too have boundaries. I just don't like them." Evelyn laughed again, and for the first time that night, the sound didn't hurt. "Please don't apologize," she said, shaking her head. "She's wonderful." The man relaxed a little, smiling at his daughter. "Clementine," he said, the name rolling out softly. "What did we talk about?" Clementine ignored him, turning her attention back to Evelyn. "It's Christmas Eve," she said earnestly. "You shouldn't be alone. Can we eat with you?" "Please, pretty please, with sprinkles." "Clemmy." The man sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You can't just—" "It's all right," Evelyn interrupted, surprising herself. "Really, you don't have to feel obligated." But Clementine wasn't giving up. "Please," she whispered, eyes wide and full of hope. "I can tell you about my Christmas list." The man, still torn between mortified and amused, looked back at Evelyn. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, the kind that passes between two people who have both known loneliness too well. Finally, he offered his hand. "I'm Garrett," he said. "Garrett Finnegan. And this little negotiator is Clementine Clemmy, if she lets you." Evelyn took his hand, her grip gentle but steady. "Evelyn Hart," she replied. Garrett hesitated, then smiled, genuine this time, warm enough to melt the frost clinging to the windows. "Would you like some company?" "No pressure, but my daughter insists the breadsticks here are the best in the whole wide world." Evelyn looked from him to Clemmy, who was practically bouncing with anticipation, and felt something unexpected stir inside her, a small, fragile flicker of hope. She nodded. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." Clemmy climbed into the empty chair opposite Evelyn, the same one Connor had abandoned only 20 minutes earlier. The little girl grinned, swinging her legs beneath the table. "See," she said brightly, "told you it's not lonely anymore." For a moment, Evelyn just looked at them, the father trying to hide his embarrassment, the child beaming like a living Christmas light, and something in her shifted. The ache didn't disappear, but it changed shape, softened around the edges. Maybe tonight wasn't the ending she thought it was. Maybe it was something else entirely. As the waiter approached, relief crossed his face when he saw Evelyn no longer alone. The candle between them burned steady now, the flame no longer trembling. Outside, snow kept falling, covering the city in quiet grace, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn didn't feel invisible. The next morning, the world outside Evelyn's window was wrapped in white. Snow still clung to rooftops and tree branches soft as powdered sugar, and the town of Asheville seemed to exhale in silence after the storm. Evelyn woke late, the faint smell of pine and cinnamon drifting from the candles she had forgotten to blow out. She stretched beneath the quilt, her mind slowly returning to the strange warmth of last night. The laughter of a little girl named Clementine, the soft kindness in her father's eyes, the unexpected sense of belonging that had followed her all the way home. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that. Maybe not since her father passed. Maybe not since she'd started believing that some people were meant to be alone. Yet the memory of that child's voice lingered in her ears, pure and bright as the bells from the old church on Main Street. "You shouldn't be sad all by yourself," the girl had said. It played again in Evelyn's head as she poured coffee into her favorite chipped mug and watched the flakes fall outside. Down the street, the world had already moved on to its Christmas morning rhythm, neighbors scraping ice from their driveways, kids bundled in red and green running toward the park. Evelyn leaned against the counter, sipping slowly, wondering whether she'd imagined the whole thing. It was too perfect to be real, the way Garrett had smiled, the way Clemmy had filled the empty space like she'd always belonged there. Maybe she thought some nights are just small miracles that come and go like snowflakes there and gone before you can hold them. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. A text from her sister Lydia. Lydia So. How was the big Christmas date? Either one or another Grinch? Evelyn stared at the screen for a moment, then smiled. Evelyn, he left after 15 minutes, but I met someone better, Lydia. What? Who? Evelyn, a 5-year-old girl named Clementine, and her very polite father. After a long pause, Lydia's reply came. Eve, are you telling me you got adopted at a restaurant? Evelyn laughed out loud, nearly spilling her coffee. Maybe, she muttered. Maybe I did. Outside, the church bells began to ring again. She stepped to the window, watching a small crowd gather near the frozen fountain in the square. Kids were tossing handfuls of snow into the air, chasing each other with mittened hands. Among them, she spotted a familiar red velvet coat darting through the snow. Evelyn blinked, then looked again. There was no mistaking that tangle of blonde curls or that laughter bright as morning. Clemmy. And next to her, Garrett, tall and steady, carrying 2 cups from the cafe across the street. Before she realized what she was doing, Evelyn was slipping into her boots, grabbing her scarf and stepping outside. The cold air bit gently at her cheeks as she crossed the street, each step leaving crisp prints on the white sidewalk. When she reached the park, Clemmy was already waving. Miss Evelyn, she squealed, bounding forward and throwing her arms around her legs. Daddy said maybe we'd see you today. I told him if I wished really hard you'd come. Garrett jogged over, smiling sheepishly, a paper cup extended toward her. Hot chocolate, he said. The bribe worked. She's been talking about you all morning. Evelyn accepted the cup, feeling her fingers warm instantly. She's persuasive, she said, looking down at the girl clinging to her coat. And very good at making wishes come true. Clemmy looked up at both of them, her cheeks pink with cold. We're going to feed the ducks, she announced proudly. Do you want to come? Daddy bought extra bread? Garrett laughed. You'd think ducks had never seen Christmas before, he said, then glancing at Evelyn. You're welcome to join us if you're not busy. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then nodded. I think I've had enough of being busy alone. They walked together to the edge of the pond, where ducks floated lazily under the thin sheet of mist. Clemmy tossed tiny pieces of bread, giggling as they splashed and quacked. Garrett and Evelyn stood side by side, their breath visible in the cold air. The silence between them gentle, not awkward. After a moment, Garrett spoke. You know she doesn't usually talk to strangers, he said softly. Last night, it surprised me. She's been quiet since her mom passed. Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded, staring at the water. Thanks. It's been 2 years, but holidays are still tricky. Clemmy's the one keeping us both afloat, I think. Evelyn watched the little girl twirl in the snow, her laughter floating through the air like music. She's a light, she said, the kind that doesn't fade easily. Garrett smiled faintly. Yeah, she's my little voice of reason, always pulling me out of my head. Evelyn looked back toward the pond, feeling something shift quietly inside her again. Maybe everyone needed a little voice like that, a reminder that life could still surprise you even when you'd stopped expecting it. Garrett's words lingered in the cold air, fragile but steady like the ripples spreading across the pond. For a while, neither of them spoke. The snow had slowed falling now in delicate threads that caught the late morning light. Evelyn watched Clemmy toss the last crumb of bread and clap her hands when 2 ducks glided closer, their feathers shimmering under the pale sun. It felt peaceful, unfamiliar, yet safe. The kind of peace she hadn't known in years, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. Just presence. Do you ever feel like time just slipped past you? She asked suddenly. Like one day you blink and you're standing somewhere you never planned to be? Garrett looked at her, his breath forming little clouds. All the time he said quietly, but lately I've started to think maybe that's where life happens, the places we didn't plan. Evelyn smiled faintly. That sounds like something your daughter would say. He chuckled, glancing toward the little girl, now crouched near the edge, her mittens dusted with snow. She's 5 going on 50. She keeps me honest. For a moment they both laughed, then silence again, but this time it was soft, almost companionable. Evelyn caught herself studying his face, the laugh lines near his eyes, the way his shoulders relaxed when he watched his daughter. He wasn't what she'd call conventionally handsome. His strength was quieter, like the warmth of a fireplace that never went out. Clemmy ran back toward them, eyes bright. "Daddy," she exclaimed, "that one duck has a feather that looks like a heart." Garrett crouched beside her. "You think so, uh-huh?" "Huh? See, that means it's lucky." She turned to Evelyn, her grin wide. "If you see a heart, you have to make a wish." Evelyn knelt next to her, feeling the chill of the snow through her jeans. "And what are you wishing for, sweetheart?" Clemmy pressed a finger to her lips. "Can't tell," she whispered, giggling. "It's a secret wish, but you can make one too." Evelyn hesitated, then closed her eyes. For a long second she let the sound of the pond and the distant bells wash over her. "I wish," she thought, "for one more day that feels like this." When she opened her eyes again, Clemmy was looking at her with that uncanny seriousness children sometimes have. "Did you wish for something happy?" "I did," Evelyn said softly. "Good," Clemmy replied. "Daddy says happy wishes work faster." Garrett laughed under his breath. "Do I now?" "You do," Clemmy insisted, tugging on his hand. "You said pancakes make people happy, right?" Garrett blinked. "I guess I did say that. Then let's have pancakes tomorrow, me, you, and Miss Evelyn." She turned to Evelyn, her face glowing with excitement. "You'll come, won't you? You like pancakes, don't you?" Evelyn felt her heart catch in her throat. She hadn't expected to be invited anywhere, not like this, not with such innocent certainty. Well, yes, I do," she said. "But no buts." Clemmy interrupted firmly, hands on her hips. "Daddy makes the best pancakes. They have little stars on them." Garrett looked both amused and apologetic. "She's persistent. Don't feel like you have to say yes." Evelyn met his eyes, and for the first time in a long while didn't feel the need to hide behind politeness. "Maybe saying yes is exactly what I need," she said. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere nearby. Clemmy laughed again, spinning in the snow until she fell backward, making an angel with her mittened hands. Garrett offered Evelyn a look that was equal parts wonder and disbelief. "Looks like you've been officially recruited," he said. Evelyn smiled, feeling the corners of her heart thaw a little more. "I think I have," she replied. As they walked back toward the square, Clemmy skipping ahead. Evelyn glanced once more at the pond. The ducks were gliding away, leaving trails that shimmered in the light. Somewhere deep inside, she felt that little voice, the one she'd buried long ago, start to whisper again. Maybe it's not too late to start over. Bellini smelled different in daylight. The candles had been replaced with the soft hum of morning chatter and the clatter of silverware on porcelain. Outside, the snow had begun to melt, pooling in the gutters like liquid glass. Inside, the scent of baked bread and roasted tomatoes hung in the air, a kind of quiet welcome that made Evelyn's pulse slow the moment she stepped in. She'd hesitated before coming. For an hour that morning, she'd stood in her kitchen staring at her reflection in the toaster, wondering if showing up again was foolish. But the echo of Clemmy's little voice, "You'll come, won't you? You like pancakes, don't you?" had been too bright to ignore. And now as she spotted them in the booth by the window, Garrett waving, Clemmy bouncing on her seat, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not excitement, something softer. Belonging, maybe. "Hey there," Garrett said when she approached. "We saved you a seat. Hope you're hungry." Clemmy grinned, sliding a plate toward her. "We already started the breadsticks, but Daddy says I have to share." Evelyn laughed as she sat. "That's very generous of you. Only because Daddy says Christmas isn't over till the leftovers are gone." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "She's a negotiator. You've been warned." Their laughter blended easily with the quiet noise of the restaurant. Evelyn watched the way father and daughter moved together, a rhythm that came from years of learning how to fill silence without words. Garrett poured her coffee before she could ask. Clemmy hummed while arranging the sugar packets into tiny houses. It was ordinary, but to Evelyn it felt like grace in disguise. So Garrett said after a while, "You live nearby?" "About 6 blocks," she replied. "Small apartment. close enough to the bookstore and too close to the ice cream shop. That sounds dangerous, he teased. She smiled. Only if you like pistachio. Clemmy does, he said. It's her thinking flavor. She says it helps her decide which bedtime story to pick. Clemmy looked up with mock seriousness. It's true. Pistachio makes your brain smarter. Evelyn sipped her coffee, feeling warmth spread through her chest, not from the drink, but from the ease of it all. No pretenses, no awkward pauses, no feeling like she had to earn her place at the table. For a long moment, she just watched the light move across the table, catching the golden crumbs on Clemmy's plate. Then Garrett asked quietly, "What about your family? Do they live nearby?" The question hit a soft place. Evelyn hesitated, setting her cup down carefully. "My sister," she said. "We used to be close, but life, you know how it gets." He nodded. "Yeah, I do. She keeps trying to set me up with people." Evelyn continued, smiling faintly. Last night was her latest attempt. I think she meant well. "Some attempts are blessings in disguise," Garrett said gently. Evelyn met his eyes and found no trace of pity there, only warmth. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that didn't need explaining. At that moment, Clemmy leaned forward, lowering her voice dramatically. "I think Miss Evelyn should come to our pancake breakfast every Sunday." Garrett laughed. "You're moving fast, kiddo. That's commitment." Clemmy shrugged, her curls bouncing. "She makes Daddy smile. That's good enough for me." Evelyn's hand paused halfway to her cup. The words landed with a quiet weight that caught her off guard. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled, blinking away the sudden warmth that stung her eyes. Outside the window, the sunlight shifted, catching the edge of Garrett's smile. "You don't have to decide about pancakes just yet," he said softly, "but the invitation stands." Evelyn nodded. "I'll think about it." The waiter returned with another basket of breadsticks steaming and dusted with salt. Garrett thanked him, breaking one in half and handing it to Clemmy, who dipped it carefully into a bowl of marinara like it was a priceless ritual. Evelyn smiled at the scene, feeling strangely content watching them. The simple rhythm of a family meal, the laughter, the crumbs, the small reach of hands across the table felt almost holy. "I haven't had lunch company like this in longer than I'd admit," she said, breaking a breadstick of her own. Garrett glanced up. "Then we'll call this overdue." She laughed softly. "Deal." For a while they ate quietly, the kind of silence that doesn't need fixing. The restaurant hummed around them, plates clinking, doors opening to let in cold air, someone humming, "Let It Snow" near the bar. Then Garrett spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "You said your sister set you up. You close with her?" Evelyn hesitated, turning her cup slowly. "We used to be. Lydia's the loud one, always fixing things. I think she worries I forgot how to live." He nodded, understanding instantly. "I get that. My mom's the same way. Calls every Friday to remind me I'm still human." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds nice." "It is. Until she starts talking about how I should get out there again." Their laughter overlapped, soft and knowing. Evelyn felt her shoulders relax. This was the kind of conversation she missed, the kind that didn't rush to fill space, the kind that grew slowly like a tree finding sunlight. Garrett leaned back, studying her quietly. "I know what it's like to lose something and think you've already used up all your second chances." She looked at him, uncertain whether to ask, but his expression said enough. There was a grief in it, softened by time, but still there like an old scar that aches in the cold. "I'm sorry," she said gently. He nodded. "Clemmy's mom passed during the pandemic. It was sudden. And He stopped, glancing toward his daughter. "Well, you start building walls after something like that. For protection, you tell yourself, until you realize you've locked yourself inside." Evelyn didn't respond at first. She just listened, her fingers resting on the edge of her plate. "I know that feeling," she said at last. "Different story, same kind of walls." Their eyes met, two people quietly recognizing the familiar language of loss. Before either could say more, Clemmy's small voice piped up through a mouthful of breadstick. "Daddy used to cry in the garage," she said matter-of-factly. "Grandma told me not to tell anyone, but I think it's okay now." Garrett nearly choked on his coffee. "Clemmy." What she said, blinking innocently. "You don't cry in there anymore." Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a laugh. "It's all right," she said softly. "Honesty's brave." Garrett exhaled, shaking his head, a faint blush coloring his face. "You see what I mean? No boundaries, Evelyn smiled. Maybe that's what makes her wonderful. Clemmy beamed proud of herself, then leaned toward Evelyn and whispered as if sharing a secret. He cries less now because he says I'm his reason. I think that's a good reason, don't you? Evelyn's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. Garrett looked away, pretending to rearrange the napkins. The air between them shifted, no longer light, but tender. A quiet understanding grew there, fragile but true. When the waiter brought the check, Garrett reached for it, but Evelyn shook her head. Let me. You hosted breakfast. He smiled, almost shy. Then, next time's mine. Next time, she echoed. He shrugged. Clemmy's already planning Sunday. Outside, the afternoon light had softened to gold. They stepped out together, the air crisp, their breath visible. Clemmy walked between them, holding one hand in each of theirs. You know, she said dreamily, I think you two look nice together. Garrett groaned, but Evelyn just laughed, the sound echoing against the shop windows. Oh, sweetheart, she said, you really do say everything that comes to mind, don't you? Clemmy nodded seriously. That's what Grandma says, too. Evelyn bent to zip the little girl's coat, her fingers brushing against the tiny mitten. When she looked up, Garrett was watching her, his expression quiet, uncertain, but softer than before. See you Sunday, he asked. Evelyn hesitated, then smiled. Sunday? She said. Clemmy gave a delighted squeal and skipped ahead, tugging on both their hands. Snowflakes began to fall again, slow, lazy drifting in the late light. For a moment, Evelyn let herself believe in small miracles, the kind that come disguised as a child's laughter and the promise of breakfast on a winter morning. Sunday arrived, dressed in sunlight. The snow that had blanketed Asheville for a week was finally giving way, retreating into glistening patches along the sidewalks. Evelyn stood by her window, buttoning her wool coat and trying not to think too hard about why she'd agreed to breakfast. It was, she told herself, simply polite, a return of kindness. But somewhere beneath that sensible reasoning was a nervous hum she couldn't quite still. She hadn't felt this particular flutter in years. It wasn't love, not yet, but something gentler, a pulse of anticipation that made her check her reflection twice and add a touch of lipstick, even though she pretended not to care. When she stepped outside, the air smelled faintly of thawing pine and fresh coffee from the diner down the block. Morning sunlight bounced off the storefront windows, and she caught her reflection smiling back unconsciously, freely. The Maple Street diner was already buzzing when she arrived. Garrett and Clemmy were at a booth near the window, the same booth where locals like to sit and watch the church crowd spill out across Main Street. Garrett looked up first, and the quiet, steady way his expression changed, surprise, softening into warmth, sent a small current through her chest. Right on time, he said. Clemmy was about to send a search party. Clemmy declared, waving her fork like a flag. Daddy said grown-ups get lost in their thoughts, but I told him maybe they just forget where they're going. Evelyn laughed, slipping into the seat across from them. You're not wrong. The smell of pancakes and maple syrup filled the air, mingled with the comforting hiss of the griddle behind the counter. The diner itself was a slice of Americana checkered tiles, coffee refills without asking, and an old jukebox that still worked when you hit it just right. A waitress with silver hair and kind eyes set down 3 steaming plates before them. There you go, sugar, she said. Stack as tall as hope itself. Thank you, Evelyn said. Any time, sweetheart. Y'all look like Sunday belongs to you, Garrett smiled. Maybe we're trying it on for size. As the waitress moved on, Evelyn caught the gentle humor in his voice, the easy way he fit into this place. It wasn't just that he belonged here, it was that he made other people feel like they did too. Clemmy poured syrup in slow circles, completely absorbed in her masterpiece. Miss Evelyn, she said without looking up. What's your favorite breakfast? Evelyn thought for a moment. When I was little, my dad used to make waffles shaped like stars. He said they were for good luck. Did they work? Evelyn smiled faintly. Some days yes, some days no, but it always made mornings better. Garrett's gaze softened. He sounds like a good man. He was, she said quietly. He passed away a few years back. After that, I guess I stopped making breakfast altogether. Garrett nodded, the understanding between them unspoken. Then today, he said gently, counts as a restart. Something in his tone lingered, a quiet conviction that made her chest ache in a way that wasn't painful, just real. She looked at him, and for a fleeting second, the diner around them faded. The laughter, the clinking dishes, the hum of the jukebox, and all she saw was possibility. Clemmy broke the silence with a squeal of triumph. "Look, my pancake looks like North Carolina." Garrett laughed. "That's good, generous sweetheart." Evelyn leaned closer, smiling. "Maybe that means we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Clemmy beamed. "See, Daddy?" She gets it. After breakfast, the three of them stepped out into the sunlight. The diner's bell jingled as the door closed behind them, and the smell of maple syrup followed like a memory. The streets of downtown Asheville were waking up shopkeepers sweeping steps, a man tuning his guitar by the fountain, children chasing each other past benches dusted with melting snow. Clemmy skipped ahead, her small boots slapping puddles as she went. Garrett and Evelyn walked slower, their breath visible in the cold. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was calm, like a shared exhale. "Clemmy's got more energy than most power plants," Evelyn said, watching the little girl twirl under the light. Garrett chuckled. "I've given up trying to keep up. She's the one keeping me alive, not the other way around." Evelyn smiled. "You two are something special." He looked at her, then at his daughter. "She saved me, honestly. When Marissa died, I didn't think I'd ever laugh again." Then one morning, Clemmy came into my room wearing her mom's apron, holding a frying pan almost bigger than her. She said, "Daddy, breakfast can fix sad hearts." Evelyn's throat tightened. She was right. "Yeah," he said quietly, "she usually is." They reached the park, an open stretch of grass and leafless trees glinting with frost. Families walked dogs, kids threw snowballs that disintegrated midair. They sat on a wooden bench, Clemmy running toward the swings. Garrett's shoulders relaxed, the sunlight catching faint streaks of silver near his temples. "You ever think about moving somewhere else?" Evelyn asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But Asheville's home. Too many memories to leave behind. Good ones." He nodded. "All kinds. But lately, there's been more good again." She looked down, fiddling with her gloves. "I'm glad," she said softly. Clemmy called from the swings, "Daddy, higher." He smiled, stood, and pushed her gently. The laughter that followed carried through the winter air, bright and unfiltered. Evelyn watched them, her heart swelling and aching all at once. She hadn't realized how lonely she'd been until now, seeing what warmth looked like. Not perfection, just presence. When Garrett returned, cheeks pink from the cold, he hesitated before sitting beside her again. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his tone careful. "Of course." He looked down at his hands. "I wasn't sure about meeting you again. Not because of you, because of me. It's been years since I let anyone this close. I didn't want to risk confusing Clemmy or—" His phone buzzed sharply, cutting through his words. He sighed, pulling it from his pocket. "Sorry." The screen lit up with the name Helen. He frowned. "It's my mom. She never calls mid-morning unless something's wrong." Evelyn nodded. "Go ahead." Garrett stepped a few paces away, his voice low and urgent. Clemmy slowed on the swing, sensing the tension. Evelyn's gaze followed him, his brow furrowed, his shoulders tightening as he listened. When he turned back, his expression had changed. "She fell," he said quietly. "My mom. At home. The neighbor's with her now, but they're taking her to Mission Hospital." Evelyn stood. "Oh no. Do you need a ride?" He shook his head, already grabbing his coat. "I'll take the car. I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said quickly. "Go." He nodded, then knelt to help Clemmy from the swing. "We have to go see Grandma," he told her gently. "She's okay, but we need to make sure." Clemmy's eyes filled with worry. "Can Miss Evelyn come too?" Garrett hesitated, torn. Evelyn bent down beside the little girl. "I'll come visit later, sweetheart," she said softly. "Right now, your grandma needs your daddy." Clemmy sniffled, but nodded. "Okay." Garrett mouthed thank you before rushing them toward the parking lot. Evelyn stood there long after the sound of their car faded. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of pine and pancakes. She pulled her coat tighter, staring at the swing still swaying in the empty air. For the first time in a long while, she felt both worry and purpose, like she'd been pulled into something bigger than herself. Something that mattered. The waiting room at Mission Hospital had that particular stillness that lives only in places where people hold their breath. The faint smell of disinfectant mixed with the bitter scent of coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. Snowmelt dripped from boots lined against the wall, and somewhere down the hall a monitor beeped with steady, indifferent rhythm. Evelyn arrived just after noon. She hadn't been asked to come, but something in Garrett's voice when he called had said enough. She's stable, he'd told her. They're running tests. Clemmie's with me. That had been all. But it was enough to make Evelyn grab her coat, a small bouquet of lilies from the corner florist, and drive across town. When she stepped inside, she spotted them immediately. Garrett sat in one of the plastic chairs, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. Clemmie was curled up beside him, head resting on his arm, a juice box half empty in her lap. Garrett looked up, weary surprise softening his expression. "You came," he said quietly. "Of course," Evelyn replied. "How is she?" "They think she fractured her wrist," he said. "She slipped on the porch steps this morning. Could have been worse." Evelyn nodded. Setting the flowers down on the small table. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the seat beside him. He nodded, and for a moment they simply sat there, listening to the hum of the vending machine. Clemmie stirred and blinked up at Evelyn, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Miss Evelyn, hey, sweetheart?" Evelyn whispered, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "You're being very brave today." Clemmie gave a drowsy smile. "Daddy says brave is doing things even when you're scared." "That's exactly right." Evelyn smiled. "And I think your daddy's brave too." Garrett gave her a look that was equal parts gratitude and fatigue. He looked older today, not in years, but in weight, the kind that sits behind the eyes. "I haven't done this in a long time," he said quietly. "Hospitals, waiting rooms. It brings everything back." Evelyn knew what he meant without asking. "You were here before Marissa," he said simply. "Different hospital, same sound of the machines." He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his face. "I promised myself I'd never let Clemmie see me fall apart again." Evelyn reached over, resting her hand gently on his. "You don't have to be perfect for her, Garrett. You just have to be real." He looked down at their hands, hers steady, his trembling, and for a moment, neither of them moved. A nurse entered the waiting room, scanning the clipboard. Finnegan Garrett stood instantly. "That's me. She's asking for you," the nurse said. "She's awake and doing fine." Relief crossed his face like sunlight through clouds. He turned to Clemmie, ready to see Grandma. Clemmie nodded eagerly, sliding off the chair. Evelyn stood too, picking up her bag. "I'll wait out here," she said. Garrett hesitated, then smiled. "Thank you for being here." "Always," she replied softly. When they disappeared down the hallway, Evelyn sat back down, folding her hands in her lap. Around her, strangers came and went, some crying quietly, others whispering into phones. She watched them, her mind wandering to her own father's hospital bed years ago, the sterile smell of the room, the way she'd sat beside him holding his hand and promising she'd be fine. She'd kept that promise, mostly. But moments like this reminded her that fine and whole weren't always the same thing. She was still thinking about that when the door opened and Garrett returned, his daughter holding a red balloon. "She's okay," he said, relief soft in his voice. "They're keeping her overnight for observation, but she's already giving orders." Clemmie giggled. "Grandma said the food is terrible, but she's eating it anyway because it's Christmas spirit." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds like her." Garrett chuckled. "You haven't met her yet. Then maybe I should." He blinked, caught off guard. "Really, you'd want to?" "Of course," Evelyn said. "If she's anything like her son or granddaughter, I'm sure she's worth meeting." Garrett hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay. She'll probably love you instantly or interrogate you for an hour. There's no middle ground." Evelyn grinned. "I can handle both." The hospital room was small but bright. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the white sheets in soft gold. Helen Finnegan sat propped against her pillows, her wrist wrapped in a neat cast, her silver hair pulled back in a low bun. She looked every bit as composed as her son had warned, sharp-eyed, alert, and assessing the moment Evelyn stepped inside. Garrett lingered by the door with Clemmie, but Helen's attention went straight to the woman carrying a vase of lilies. "You must be Evelyn," she said. Her voice had the calm authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime making sure things got done right. Evelyn smiled, setting the flowers on the side table. "Guilty as charged. How are you feeling?" "I've been better," Helen replied dryly, then softened. "But the doctor says I'll live. Can't argue with that." Garrett chuckled. "She's already tried to negotiate her discharge. I'm not a fan of being fussed over," Helen said, eyes narrowing playfully at her son. "Besides, hospitals are for people who have time to lie around. I've got a granddaughter to spoil and a house that apparently has traitorous stairs." Clemmie giggled. "Daddy says he's going to build you a ramp, did he?" "Now?" Helen raised an eyebrow at Garrett, who looked guilty. "Good. I'll hold him to it." Evelyn laughed softly, and for a moment the room lightened. She could feel the closeness in this family, the teasing that came from love, the quiet strength of people who had weathered storms together. When Garrett and Clemmy went to speak with the nurse, Evelyn pulled a chair closer to Helen's bedside. "You raised a good man," she said gently. Helen tilted her head, studying her. "He tries hard," she replied, "sometimes too hard. He thinks being strong means never letting anyone see him afraid." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window. "But since you came along, he's different." Evelyn blinked. "Different, he smiles more," Helen said simply. "Laughs easier. I hadn't heard that sound in years, not since Marissa passed. I thought it was gone for good." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything special. It's just your family's kind." Helen gave her a small, knowing smile. "Kindness has a way of finding what it needs. You remind him that there's still life to be lived." Evelyn didn't know what to say. She looked down at her hands, feeling both humbled and uncertain. "Sometimes I worry I'm walking into something I don't deserve." Helen reached out, her good hand surprisingly firm for her age. "Don't you dare think that. People who bring peace into other lives rarely find it easily in their own, but when it comes, you hold on." The sound of small footsteps broke the moment. Clemmy bounced back into the room, holding a paper cup of cocoa. "Grandma, look, Miss Evelyn helped me stir it." Helen smiled warmly. "She's a keeper, then." Garrett entered a moment later, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Doctor says she's free to go home tomorrow. As long as she promises not to arm wrestle anyone." "I make no promises," Helen replied, her tone mock serious. Everyone laughed, and for the first time since that morning, the air felt light. When visiting hours ended, Garrett walked Evelyn to the elevator. The hallway was quiet except for the distant echo of footsteps and the hum of fluorescent lights. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. "She really liked you. That's a big deal." Evelyn smiled. "She's wonderful. Tough but wonderful. She used to say the same about my dad." Garrett murmured, then paused. "You were right earlier about not needing to be perfect. I've been trying so hard to keep things together that I forgot. Sometimes letting people in is the strongest thing you can do." Evelyn looked at him, her heart full. "You're doing just fine, Garrett." Before she could say more, Helen's voice called faintly from the room down the hall. "Garrett, don't let that girl walk away too far." Evelyn blinked, surprised, then laughed softly. Garrett rubbed the back of his neck, grinning. "Told you no filter runs in the family." As the elevator doors opened, Evelyn turned to him, her voice gentle but certain. "For what it's worth, I don't plan on walking too far." Garrett's smile deepened, small but sure. "Good." The doors closed between them, and as Evelyn descended toward the parking lot, her heart carried a quiet warmth, the kind that stays long after words fade. Back in her room, Helen lay awake, eyes half closed, whispering to herself, "He's finally smiling again. Don't let that fade." Winter lingered in Asheville longer than usual that year, the kind that painted morning silver and made even the smallest act, a shared cup of coffee, a hand brushed against another, feel like a small rebellion against the cold. It had been 3 weeks since Helen's fall. She was back home now, wrist healing, fussing over her houseplants and pretending not to need help. Garrett stopped by every day after work, and Evelyn came on weekends, always bringing something homemade: apple cobbler one week, vegetable soup the next. She told herself it was just being neighborly, but even she didn't quite believe that anymore. On this particular Saturday morning, the Finnegan kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter. Clemmy stood on a step stool by the counter, wearing a pink apron that said, "Little Chef stirring pancake batter with deep concentration." "Grandma says I should never trust a pancake that's too perfect," Clemmy declared. "It means it's lying." Evelyn laughed. "And what does an honest pancake look like?" "Lumpy but happy," Clemmy said, sprinkling chocolate chips into the bowl. From the dining room, Helen called out, "That's right, sweetheart. Life's the same way. A little mess just means you're doing something real." Evelyn smiled at the sound of her voice. Helen had that rare mix of wisdom and mischief that made every conversation feel like sitting beside a fire. Garrett entered, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Morning, ladies," he said, hanging his coat. "Smells like a bakery in here." "Breakfast of champions," Evelyn said, handing him a mug of coffee. "We're testing Clemmy's latest culinary philosophy." Garrett took a sip, pretending to ponder. "Lumpy but happy, huh? I can live with that." The morning unfolded gently. The radio hummed with old jazz standards, the kind of songs that made people sway without meaning to. Helen supervised from her chair, offering opinions and unsolicited advice, while Clemmy insisted on flipping pancakes all by herself. Evelyn found herself laughing more than she had in years. Every small thing felt precious: the clatter of forks, the sound of Garrett's low laugh, the sunlight warming the kitchen tiles. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was ordinary, and yet it felt like a gift. After breakfast, Garrett offered to drive Helen to her physical therapy appointment, leaving Evelyn and Clemmy behind to clean up. Clemmy hummed as she dried dishes, her little hands careful with each plate. "Miss Evelyn," she said, after a moment, "Daddy talks about you a lot." Evelyn looked up from the sink, amused. "Oh, what does he say?" Clemmy grinned. "He says you make things calm, that you don't try to fix everything, you just make the noise go quiet." The words stilled Evelyn's hands for a moment. She wasn't sure what to say. "That's a very nice thing for him to say," she replied softly. Clemmy nodded. "He also said Grandma likes you, and Grandma doesn't like anyone at first. So you must be special." Evelyn chuckled, hiding her blush behind a towel. "Your grandma and I understand each other. We've both learned to be a little stubborn." Clemmy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Daddy gets scared sometimes. He thinks I don't notice, but I do." Evelyn crouched down beside her, gentle. "We all get scared, sweetie, even grown-ups, especially the ones who care a lot." Clemmy thought about that, her brows knitting together. "Then maybe that means Daddy cares a lot." "I think it does," Evelyn said, smiling, "and he's lucky to have you." The little girl grinned, throwing her arms around Evelyn's neck. "We're lucky to have you too." For a long moment, Evelyn just held her, the simple warmth of that small embrace anchoring her in a way she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't romance or obligation. It was family built one quiet Saturday morning at a time. That afternoon, the snow had melted into slush along the park trail. Garrett and Evelyn walked side by side, their breaths rising in soft clouds. The air was crisp but kind, the kind that carried silence without awkwardness. "She told me you made pancakes," he said with a smile. "Lumpy but happy," Evelyn replied. Her words, not mine. He laughed, the sound easy and warm. "She likes you, you know. My mom does too. That doesn't happen often." Evelyn looked ahead, her boots crunching the path. "They make it easy to care," she said, then quieter. "So do you." Garrett slowed, watching her face. The winter light caught in her hair, and something shifted in his expression, half gratitude, half fear. "Evelyn, Before he could finish, Clemmy's voice echoed from behind them, bright and urgent. "Wait for me!" They turned to see her running toward them, cheeks flushed, scarf flying. Evelyn laughed as the little girl grabbed both their hands. "Now it's better?" Clemmy said, swinging between them. "It's a family walk." Garrett met Evelyn's gaze over his daughter's head. His words lost, but his meaning clear. And as they walked together through the fading light, Evelyn realized that happiness didn't always come in grand moments. Sometimes it arrived quietly, hand in hand, on an ordinary day. It started with a letter. Not the kind anyone expects anymore. Not an email or a text, but a real letter folded neatly inside a cream-colored envelope with Garrett's name written in delicate handwriting. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked between bills and a grocery flyer, and for a long while he just stared at it. When he finally opened it, the words pulled him backward in time. "Dear Garrett, it's been almost 5 years. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'd like to see you. I'd like to see Clemmy too, if you'll allow it. Marianne." Evelyn found him that evening sitting on the porch, the letter open beside a cold cup of coffee. The sky above Asheville was turning amber, the mountains glowing faintly in the distance. She knew something was wrong before he said a word. "Old friend?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Marissa's sister, Clemmy's aunt. We haven't spoken since the funeral." Evelyn sat beside him, waiting. Garrett rubbed his forehead, eyes distant. "She blamed me," he said quietly. "Said if I'd pushed harder for treatment, maybe Marissa would have lasted longer. Maybe she wasn't wrong." "She was wrong," Evelyn said softly. "You did everything you could." He let out a hollow laugh. "Maybe. But grief has a way of rewriting the truth." The porch was quiet, except for the faint hum of cicadas and the creak of the old swing. Inside, Clemmy's laughter floated from the kitchen as Helen helped her with a puzzle. Life sounded so normal in there, Too normal for the weight sitting between them now. Evelyn reached for the letter. She wants to see Clemmy. Garrett nodded. Says she's moving back to town, wants to reconnect. I don't know if that's good or if it's just another storm waiting to happen. She's still family, Evelyn said carefully. And sometimes even broken branches can bloom again. He smiled faintly. You always make things sound simple. Not simple, she corrected. Possible. He folded the letter again, slower this time. You'd come with me if I agreed to meet her? Evelyn looked toward the window where Clemmy's small silhouette danced in lamplight. If you think it's right, she said. You don't have to face the past alone. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Garrett whispered almost to himself, maybe it's time. The next afternoon, the sky hung low and gray over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the kind of weather that made everything quieter. Garrett parked his truck in front of the small cafe on Lexington Avenue, hands gripping the steering wheel long after the engine stopped. Evelyn sat beside him, her calm presence steadying the air between them. You don't have to do this today, she said softly. He shook his head. If I don't, I never will. Through the cafe window, they could see a woman sitting alone at a corner table. A woman in her 40s, slender, her auburn hair tucked behind her ears. Marianne. She looked nothing like Marissa, yet something about the way she held her cup. Both hands wrapped tight around it felt hauntingly familiar. Inside, the smell of roasted coffee beans mingled with the faint sound of a piano playing through the speakers. Marianne looked up as they approached, surprise and hesitation flashing across her face. Garrett, she said, standing. Her voice trembled just enough to betray years of distance. Thank you for coming. He nodded, polite but guarded. This is Evelyn, he said, gesturing gently. A friend. Evelyn offered a warm smile. It's good to meet you, Marianne. Marianne returned it faintly. You too. They sat. For a while, the only sound was the hiss of the espresso machine and the muted chatter of strangers. Then, Marianne spoke, her hands fidgeting with the sugar packet. I should start by saying, I'm sorry, she said, for the things I said after the funeral. I was angry at the world, at God, and at you, because you were still here. I didn't want to believe that she was gone. Garrett's jaw tightened. You weren't the only one who didn't. Marianne nodded, tears glinting. I know that now. I shouldn't have cut you off. I shouldn't have cut her off. Garrett frowned. Her Clemmy, Marianne whispered. I thought seeing her would make the loss worse. But the truth is not seeing her. That's what broke me. Evelyn listened quietly, her hand resting lightly on the table close enough for Garrett to feel its presence if he needed it. Marianne continued, voice steadier now. I've been in Charlotte these past years trying to start over, but I never did. Not really, and lately I've been thinking about the things Marissa left behind, her letters, her journals. She stopped, searching Garrett's face. There was one she wrote for you. I wasn't ready to give it to you then. Garrett froze. A letter. Marianne nodded, reaching into her purse. Her hands trembled as she set a small envelope on the table, yellowed at the edges, Marissa's looping handwriting still elegant and unmistakable. Evelyn's breath caught quietly. Garrett stared at the letter but didn't reach for it. I didn't read it, Marianne said. I couldn't, but I think she wanted you to have it when you were ready to live again. She managed a fragile smile. Maybe now you are. The cafe seemed to fade into silence. Garrett's fingers brushed the edge of the paper like it might vanish if he pressed too hard. Thank you, he whispered. Marianne stood slowly. Tell Clemmy I'd like to see her when the time's right. No pressure. She glanced at Evelyn, her voice softening. You're good for him, I can tell. He always needed someone who could see him clearly. When she left, the doorbell chimed softly behind her, and the sound lingered long after she disappeared down the street. Garrett sat motionless for several minutes, the letter still untouched between his hands. Evelyn stayed silent, waiting. Finally, he spoke. I thought I'd buried every piece of that life. And now, Evelyn met his eyes. Now you have a chance to finish the story. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little. I'm not sure I'm ready to read it. Then don't, she said gently. Not until you want to. The past will wait. He looked at her, a faint, grateful smile breaking through the storm of his thoughts. You always know what to say. Evelyn shook her head. No, I just listen. Outside, the first snowflakes of evening began to fall soft and slow, dusting the street in quiet silver. Garrett tucked the letter carefully inside his coat as if it were something sacred. "Come on," he said, standing. "Let's go home." And as they stepped into the cold, Evelyn slipped her hand into his. He didn't look at her, didn't need to. The weight of the letter against his heart was heavy, but for the first time in years, it wasn't unbearable. The house was quiet that night. Outside, a thin layer of snow had settled again, softening the edges of everything it touched: rooftops, fences, and the bare oak trees that stretched toward the moon. Inside, the only sound came from the soft ticking of the clock above the fireplace and the low hum of the heater. Garrett sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Clemmy usually colored, and Evelyn read her morning paper. Before him lay a single envelope, Marissa's letter. Its corners worn, its presence somehow both comforting and unbearable. Evelyn had already put Clemmy to bed. She moved quietly through the room, setting a cup of tea in front of him without saying a word. The way she moved, gentle, sure, was enough to steady him. "Still not ready?" she asked softly. He shook his head, staring at the envelope. "It feels like if I open it, I'll have to say goodbye all over again." Evelyn sat beside him, hands folded loosely in her lap. "Maybe not goodbye," she said. "Maybe just thank you." For a long while they sat together in silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Garrett reached for the letter. The paper made a faint crackle as he broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet written in Marissa's graceful cursive. His breath caught as he began to read. "My dearest Garrett, if you're reading this, it means time has done what it always does, carried us forward even when we weren't ready. I hope by now you've learned how to breathe again, how to laugh again. I hope our little girl still sees you as her hero, because that's what you are, even when you don't feel like it. Please don't live in the shadow of what happened. Life is meant to keep growing even through loss. Love again when it feels right. Don't hide from it. Don't think it betrays me, it honors me. Tell Clemmy that her mother loves her beyond measure and that she should always chase joy even when it runs. And if someone kind ever reaches for your hand, don't pull away. Take it. You deserve to be found again. With all my love always, Marissa." When he finished, the room felt impossibly still, the kind of stillness that carries both ache and peace. Garrett's eyes shimmered, but the tears didn't fall. They lingered, caught between grief and gratitude. Evelyn rested her hand over his. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The letter lay between them like a bridge between what had been and what could be. "She was wise," Evelyn whispered. He nodded slowly. "She always was." They sat there until the clock struck midnight, the faint chime echoing through the quiet house. Outside, the snow continued to fall, 1,000 tiny lights drifting from the sky. Finally, Garrett folded the letter carefully as if returning a sacred thing to its place. "I think I can breathe again," he said softly. Evelyn smiled, eyes glistening. Then that's what she wanted. Morning came soft and golden. The snow outside shimmered under the first light, turning the whole yard into a quiet sea of silver. In the kitchen, the smell of toast and cinnamon drifted through the air. Clemmy sat at the table, swinging her legs, the folded letter in her small hands. "Mommy's handwriting is pretty," she said. Garrett nodded gently. She always had a way with words. Helen smiled from the stove, pouring coffee. "So does her daughter." Evelyn leaned against the counter, watching them, 3 generations framed by morning light. No grand speeches, no tears, now just peace. Garrett looked at her eyes, steady voice, quiet. "She told me to take someone's hand if it ever felt right." Evelyn met his gaze, warm and certain. "Then don't wait too long." He reached for her hand across the table, and this time he didn't let go. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, flooding the room in soft gold, as if the world itself had decided to start again. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words. A letter on a kitchen table, a child's laughter echoing through a quiet house, or the way morning light touches 2 hands that finally dare to hold each other. Garrett's story wasn't about riches or tragedy. It was about learning how to forgive himself, how to rebuild a life not through grand gestures, but through the small mercies of everyday love. Through Evelyn's quiet strength, Helen's wisdom, and Clemmy's innocent heart, he discovered what many of us spend a lifetime seeking: the peace that comes when we stop running from our past. In the end, redemption didn't arrive like thunder. It came softly, like snow falling over Asheville, covering every scar in gentle light. There's something profoundly American in that image. A warm kitchen on a cold morning, the smell of coffee and cinnamon, a family choosing to sit together again. For those of us who have lived long enough to know that love is rarely perfect, maybe that's the truest kind of grace, the chance to start over one honest day at a time. Love and forgiveness are not about erasing what was broken, but about learning how to carry it with tenderness, kindness. Quiet, patient, and steadfast can rewrite a story that once felt finished. Everyone, no matter how wounded, deserves to be loved and to belong to a home. Like the porch light that glows through the night, one small act of compassion can guide us and those we love safely back home. So tonight, as you listen to the hum of your own house, maybe pour yourself a cup of coffee. Think of someone you once missed and let this story remind you. Happiness often begins in the ordinary. If this story touched your heart, type 1 in the comments, and if you think it could have been told better, type 0 and share your thoughts. Either way, thank you for being here, for listening, and for keeping the light of kindness alive.